A shy girl misses the last bus of the night. A car pulls over. Inside, a stranger. Young, magnetic. A CEO fleeing the very life he built. In the quiet of the cabin, two people who should have never crossed paths begin to open up. Gently, warily, touching on corners of themselves no one's ever asked about, because sometimes one unexpected moment is all it takes to lead us somewhere we never dared to dream, and this is where it all begins. Emma never stood out at the office. She moved quietly, spoke softly, and seemed to hover just outside the circle of everything. Colleagues often forgot she was in the same meeting, or that she too had shown up at the year-end party at EA. 6:14 p.m. She shut down her computer, capped her cold coffee from the morning and stood up. A few people were still chatting at the kitchenette. None of them noticed her leave. She was used to that, maybe too used to it. And maybe, just a little, tired of being so used to it. Outside, the sky had dimmed to a bruise, clouds hanging heavy like damp silk over the city. Emma wrapped her scarf tight, zipped her coat to the collar, and stepped out of the building. The air smelled of wet concrete and rotting leaves. She walked briskly, heart pounding, not from the cold, but from the hope that she might still catch the last bus, but it was already gone. Emma stood on the sidewalk watching the tail lights disappear around the corner. In that moment, she wasn't sure who to blame, herself or a world that always seemed to run cold and precisely. On time, the wind picked up. Rain began to fall, soft and persistent, like someone drumming fingertips against her scalp. She reached for her phone, 4% battery, too little to call a ride, too late to ask for help. With no better option, Emma turned from the road and began to walk. Cold crept through her thin socks, her footsteps dissolving into the soft patter of rain, echoing in the hollow spaces between buildings. The city at night had emptied. She passed shuttered storefronts, weary neon signs flickering onto wet pavement. No one stopped. No one looked. She was just another quiet silhouette, nameless and small. A soft sound made her pause. A black car glided over the slick street and came to a gentle stop at the curb. The passenger window lowered. Inside was a man, early 30s, tousled brown hair, eyes dark and steady, like rooms with no natural light. "Are you okay?" His voice was calm, not too soft, not rushed, just enough not to frighten her. Emma blinked. She wasn't used to being asked that. She stepped back, instinctively keeping her distance. The man raised both hands, palms up, away from the wheel, as if to show he meant no harm. "I'm not trying to scare you," he said slowly. "Just saw you walking. You look cold." Rain tapped steadily on the car roof like a countdown. Emma looked at him, then at the empty street. There was no one else. "Need a ride?" She didn't answer right away. Every voice in her head was warning her, but her feet were numb, her ankles soaked, and something in the man's eyes didn't match the warnings her mother had taught her. She nodded. Just barely, he dipped his head and pressed a button. The lock clicked open. Emma slid into the seat and the leather was warm and soft. The car smelled of cedarwood and a faint trace of cinnamon, familiar, though she couldn't place it. She clasped her hands in her lap. The car rolled forward. No music, no small talk. Emma tilted her head slightly, studying him. One hand rested lightly on the wheel. No ring. He didn't look at her. Didn't force a conversation. "Where do you live?" he asked as they reached the first intersection, East End near Ashgrove Park, she said quietly. He nodded and changed lanes. The rain picked up. Drops struck the windows like a slow, irregular heartbeat. The silence inside the car didn't feel awkward. It felt like shelter, like a quiet roof over the noise of the day. At a red light, the car stopped. Emma glanced down. A business card lay tucked between the seat and the door. She bent to pick it up, not out of curiosity but politeness. Her eyes landed on the bold print. Alaric Vale, CEO, Haven Group. She frowned. That name. She'd seen it before, on new glass buildings downtown or in those financial profiles about people who made it. Before she could hide her surprise, the man, Alaric, turned toward her. "Guess I dropped that," he said, without a hint of concern. Emma handed it back without a word, just a quiet, "Thanks." He took it, nodded. Neither of them offered an explanation. The car turned down a narrow street flanked by shadowed trees. She recognized the way, almost home. A small pang tugged at her, though she didn't understand why. "Here's fine," she said, pointing to the familiar corner. He pulled over gently. She unbuckled but didn't reach for the door right away. There was something she wanted to say, another kind of thank you, something deeper. She didn't say it, neither did he, just a nod, simple enough. Emma stepped out. The door closed with a soft thud. The car rolled away. She stood there, watching the red taillights drift into the dark. The rain had eased. The air smelled of earth and something new, a moment that seemed so small, a ride she didn't expect, a man she never meant to meet. And Emma, she didn't yet know she had boarded a journey with no way back. Emma never imagined she'd find herself in a car like this, beside a stranger, on a drizzly night, her shoes still damp, her thoughts unraveling like a snapped string. She sat still, eyes drifting over the softly lit dashboard. No music. Just the rhythmic swipe of the wipers and the low, steady breath of the engine. She glanced at him. Alaric. She knew his name now. It wasn't unfamiliar. But nothing about his face. The quiet profile, the slight hollows beneath his eyes, the tired lines near his mouth said CEO. No gleaming watch, no commanding gestures. He was just there, hands resting lightly on the wheel, eyes on the road ahead, as if searching for something far off and half lost. Was it really okay to get in? She wondered. She looked down, at her hands folded in her lap, wet, cold, trembling just slightly. She wasn't sure if it was the rain or something else. "Are you always this quiet?" he asked, still looking ahead. Emma's lips curved, a shy flicker. "Only when I'm thinking," she said. "What about—" A pause. Rain tapped softly against the windows, like an overture no one needed to memorize. "Whether I made a mistake," she murmured. Then quickly added, "Getting into this car." For the first time he turned to look at her, not startled, not offended, just honest, as though he'd been wondering the same thing himself. "I get that," he said. "But you didn't." She nodded faintly, but she didn't know if she believed him. Not because of him, because of herself. She was the kind who avoided the unexpected at all costs. "Do you always offer strangers rides?" she asked. He smiled, a breeze of a smile. "No. First time. Lucky me? Maybe it's lucky me." She didn't know what to say to that. It wasn't flirtation. It wasn't scripted. It felt like something he simply meant. The car rolled slowly over a narrow bridge. Streetlights shimmered on the wet asphalt like water glass. In that hush, his voice returned, low and quiet. "You looked like you needed someone to ask." "Ask?" "What? If you were okay." Emma pressed her lips together. No one asked her that. Not really. People threw the words out in elevators, over lunch breaks. But no one ever stopped long enough to wait for the answer. "Maybe I did," she whispered. Neither of them said anything more. But the silence wasn't cold. It felt like a thin blanket on a rainy night. Not quite warm, but enough to make you feel less alone. Her eyes landed again on the business card resting on the dashboard. She'd seen it before, but now it looked like a puzzle piece she hadn't quite placed. Alaric Vale, CEO, Haven Group. She couldn't help it. She had to ask, "So, you're him?" He tilted his head slightly, not pretending to. "Misunderstand him, the CEO, Haven Group." He nodded like someone caught sneaking candy from their own pocket. "You don't look like one." "Good. I'm not trying to tonight." Emma was surprised, and yet she understood. There was something in the way he sat, in the way he let the silence linger, that felt like someone hiding from the weight of their own title. "People must recognize you," she said. "Only when I want them to." She nodded, then looked out the window. The streetlights stretched on like rows of candles in a chapel, each glow waiting for someone to come home. He didn't talk about work. She didn't ask. They let the quiet become their bridge. The car slowed as it turned into a quiet neighborhood, houses shut tight, warm light smudged behind curtains. Almost. "There," she said. He nodded. She didn't want the ride to end, though she couldn't say why. Maybe because for the first time in so long, she didn't feel invisible. Someone had paused, had looked, had listened. The car stopped. At the corner, she opened the door and stepped out. The rain had almost stopped. "Thanks for not being weird," she said, half teasing. "Thanks for not running away," he replied, eyes still on the road. She smiled, a small smile, but real. She closed the door. The car pulled away. Emma stood there a moment longer, then turned and walked toward her old apartment, where everything waited just as before, except she wasn't entirely the same. Emma hadn't expected to see him again. The next morning, as her hand curled around a lukewarm mug of office coffee, she still hadn't decided whether last night had been something strange or something she ought to be grateful for. That black car, his quiet voice, the silence that had felt like air, it kept replaying in her mind, a background track she couldn't mute. And then at the end of the day, stepping out into the pale gold light of dusk, there he was, leaning against his car, white shirt sleeves rolled, tie loosened. He didn't have to say a word. His eyes asked it for him. "Do you want to get in again?" Emma didn't ask why he was there, didn't ask how he'd remembered where she worked. She just walked over, opened the door and slid in. As if all day she'd been holding her breath for this exact moment, the air inside the car carried a trace of mint. The window was cracked open, letting in a soft breeze. Jazz played. Faintly, like the distant hum of a midnight cafe, she spoke first. "I usually walk home. I mean, when I miss the bus..." Alaric didn't turn to her, but the corner of his mouth lifted. "You miss it often?" "Often enough," she said, gazing out the window. "I think I let it leave me." He nodded, still watching. "The road. Sometimes we do that, let things go, and even if they could take us somewhere." She turned toward him. "What about you? Do you let things go?" He didn't answer right away. A truck passed in the opposite direction, its headlights slicing across his face like a quick flash of something unspoken. "I used to hold on to everything," he said. "Deadlines, numbers, titles. The version of me everyone expected." She didn't speak. It wasn't a story, but somehow it said more than most stories could. "Was it worth it?" she asked. Alaric gave a small, rueful smile. "Not happy, not bitter. Just the kind that belongs to someone who's tasted all the wrong kinds. Of ambition, I thought it was, until I couldn't remember what my own voice sounded like." Emma exhaled softly. She knew that feeling, the way your words slowly become borrowed, shaped by others, until one day you try to speak for yourself and find there's nothing left. She looked down at her hands, the slender fingers, nails chipped from too many. "Hours at a keyboard, my job isn't big," she said. "But it's loud, everyone talks and no one really says anything." Alaric didn't respond, but the way he tilted his head just slightly toward her made her feel like someone was really listening. "I feel invisible," she went on, her voice even, like a story that didn't need an ending. "Some days I get through the whole shift without anyone saying my name." She smiled then, a small lopsided smile that drifted into the silence like a kite with no wind. He asked, his voice barely more than a breath, "So why stay?" Emma didn't answer right away. She'd asked herself that question hundreds of times, but hearing it from someone else made it feel real. "Because I don't know what else I can do," she whispered. Outside, trees slid past in blurred rows. Streetlights blinked on. Time moved slowly, but somehow just right. Alaric glanced at her then, his eyes holding something that didn't need translating. "Maybe it's not about what you can do," he said, "but what makes you feel alive." She blinked, not from surprise, but because she'd forgotten that life was once something you could feel. The car stopped at an intersection. Red light. Stillness. For a moment the world seemed to pause. She looked at him, really looked. This man was no longer just a name on a card. He was someone, like her. still learning how to find his way back to the sound of his own voice. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" For asking, for listening, for not trying to fix anything." He tilted his head, eyes softening. "Sometimes the only thing we need is someone to sit beside us in silence." She nodded. They didn't say anything more. But in the hush that followed, something began. Not a relationship, not a promise, just a connection. Fragile as thread, and real as a heartbeat. The night wind slipped through the cracked window, carrying the scent of old rain and the faint drifting sweetness of milkwood blossoms. Emma leaned toward the glass, chin resting in her hand, eyes following the flow of passing headlights. Like distant thoughts she couldn't quite hold. The air in the car was quiet, an intentional quiet, like space left open so unspoken thoughts could find their way in. She knew she should keep her distance. A man like him, with that business card, that deep voice, those eyes shaped by too much knowing, didn't belong to her world. But sitting beside him, that world no longer seemed so far away. And because of that, she needed to ask, "Are you really who I think you are?" Her voice was soft, but the question carried weight. Alaric didn't flinch. He didn't turn his head. Just pressed the gas a little more, his gaze fixed ahead as if reading something just beyond the painted lines. "Depends," he said. "Who do you think I am?" Emma let out a quiet laugh, not amused, not mocking, just a note of hesitation finding its voice. "A name on a card. A man who owns buildings I can't even afford to walk into." He exhaled slowly. The wind tousled his hair, and in the golden flicker of street lamps his face looked clearer and more worn. "Yes," he said. "That's me." What followed was silence, thick as mist, impossible to shake off. Emma swallowed, her eyes still trained on the window. "Then why are you here?" The question sliced gently through the hush. It wasn't accusatory nor suspicious, just real. Because everything about him felt out of place in the frame of her everyday life. He smiled. Not big, but enough to deepen his voice. When he answered, "I ask myself that every day." The car rolled to a stop at a deserted intersection. The traffic light blinked amber, like a warning with no reason. "Everything looked right from the outside," he said. "But inside, I was suffocating." Emma turned to him. It wasn't the kind of sentence she ever expected to hear from someone like him. Suffocating. From what? He rested one arm on the steering wheel, his thumb brushing his forehead, searching for the right words. Noise. Pressure. The eyes. People needing me to be someone I didn't recognize anymore. She didn't say anything, because somehow those words were the shape of thoughts she'd never known how to name. He continued slowly, as if peeling back armor. With each sentence, I built something. Big, respected, powerful. But somewhere along the way, I lost track of who I was building it for. Emma drew a deep breath, her chest tightening with something she couldn't explain. He turned toward her for the first time all evening, fully facing her. "You asked why I'm here? I think because I needed to be invisible. Just for a little while." The silence that followed was warmer than any heater. She nodded, not in agreement, but in understanding. "Funny," she said, still looking out at the dark. "You ran away to feel invisible. I've been invisible my whole life, and now I think I'm trying to be seen." He didn't speak, but his gaze softened, and in her he seemed to recognize a part of himself from the days before. He became a title before success came with a price. She turned, met his eyes again. "Do you miss it?" And he considered her for a moment, then said, "I miss the version of me who used to care about small things, like late-night drives, or the way the city smells after it rains." Emma smiled, barely, but it was there. "Maybe you're not running away," she whispered. "Maybe you're just remembering." He didn't reply, but the smile that tugged at his lips wasn't weary anymore. It was the kind that came when you stumbled on something you'd forgotten you loved, small, ordinary, but real. It wasn't the first time Emma sat in his car, but this time he didn't drive toward her neighborhood. There were no familiar streetlights, no soft jazz playing, no steady beat of the wipers, just a dark road leading out of the city, and a silence so full it felt like its own presence. Not awkward, just heavy. Alaric hadn't spoken for the first 15 minutes. His hands rested quietly on the wheel, but his eyes looked farther than the road, searching for something. Beyond the horizon. Emma didn't ask. She wasn't the kind to push someone open. But the stillness between them, so quiet it almost had a name, told her something inside him was breaking. At last, he turned into an empty parking lot on the edge of an unlit. Parked, the trees stood still as if holding their breath. The car came to a stop. The engine faded. Only the soft sound of their breathing remained and Emma's heartbeat, louder than usual. I used to think, Alaric said, eyes still forward, that if I just worked hard enough, hit every milestone, kept pushing, one day I'd feel happy. His voice was low and steady, without dramatics, but every word fell with the weight of lead sinking through water. I have an office on the 50th floor that overlooks the entire city. But every morning I wake up, I just want to roll over and go back to sleep. Emma leaned slightly toward him, her hand gripping the strap of her bag, not out of fear, but because something in the air was unraveling. Something she didn't know if she could reach or save. No one sees that, he went on. They see me giving speeches, signing deals, smiling in magazine photos, but no one sees me alone in an overpriced apartment, turning on the TV just to hear a voice hoping someone texts me, and not about business. She didn't know if she should say something, but she placed her hand gently on the seat, close to his, not touching. A quiet offering. He glanced down at his hands. I've tried meditating, taking time off, scaling back, but no one really lets me. Because to them, I'm a name, a role, the guy who makes things happen. And to you, Emma asked softly, who are you to yourself? For the first time that night he turned to face her, held her gaze and long, searching for a word he seemed to have forgotten how to say. I don't know anymore, he breathed. I don't know who I am, if I'm not who they need. Breeze slipped through the cracked window. Outside, the leaves rustled like they understood. Emma sat up straighter, her eyes fixed on the dark ahead. I used to think, if I was quiet enough, good enough, worked hard enough, maybe the world would notice, she said, her voice calm but sure. But it turns out the world doesn't hear people who are too quiet. It only listens when you start saying what you really feel. Alaric looked at her then, with an expression that felt like surrender, like handing over the weight he'd carried too long for anyone to see. I'm tired, he said, barely above a whisper. So tired, I'm not even afraid of it anymore. She didn't speak, just leaned slightly in, not enough to intrude, just enough so he'd know he wasn't alone in it. Do you ever cry? She asked, not teasing. He gave a small laugh and shook his head. I don't even remember the last time. Maybe when I was 15, the night my parents split. Emma nodded. Maybe it's time. He went quiet. Then closed his eyes. No tears, but his face softened, like for the first time in years he allowed himself not to be strong. The car remained still. Outside, the city drifted into sleep, but inside something stirred awake. Not love, not pity, but the simple sacred act of being truly seen by another soul who once believed she was invisible too. The rain had long since stopped, but inside the car the air still held the damp chill of late night. Emma sat beside Alaric, her hands resting gently on her lap, her palms slowly warming after minutes of silence. They hadn't spoken since. He'd stopped the car and said, I don't know who I am if I'm not the name everyone needs, and there was nothing more to add. That sentence alone had quieted everything. Alaric let out a slow, deep breath, as if releasing the last bit of weight pressed against his chest. Then he turned to her. His eyes were lit, not with joy, but with the calm resolve of someone ready to take off the final mask. I want to try again, he said. Not everything, not from scratch, just a small part, a small team, a project that's not about profit but about doing something that means something. Emma looked at him wide-eyed, as if she'd just heard the most improbable proposition. And you're the first person I thought of, he added. She let out a soft laugh, not disbelief, not dismissal, just a reflex against how surreal it all sounded. Me? He nodded, gaze steady. Because you look at people, not to judge but to understand, because you know what it feels like to be overlooked so you don't overlook anyone. And because, he hesitated, you make me feel like I could begin again, without shame. This time Emma didn't know where to look. Something stirred in her chest. A quiet panic, a tender ache she couldn't quite name. You know I'm not anything special, she said softly. Exactly, Alaric replied. That's what makes you special. She said nothing. The lights from a passing car streaked across the ceiling, tracing a pale line like a fate not yet written. What kind of project? She asked, needing something to anchor her before the tide of feeling rose too high. We're building a community space, he said, for young people to learn skills, connect, find work, not based on their grades, but on their stories. Emma blinked. She'd never heard anything like it, and it sounded like something that should have existed already. And what do you want me to do? Help build the first team. Listen, connect, organize. You don't need experience, just the heart you already have. The heart you already have. Emma took a deep breath. She wasn't good at new things, she didn't trust uncertain roads. But in that moment, she remembered the lunches she ate alone, eyes lowered, phone in hand, like a shield against loneliness. She remembered the days she moved like machinery, going home only to stare at the ceiling in a silence no one ever broke. And now, someone was asking her to step out of that shell. I don't know if I can do it, she said, almost confessing. No one does, Alaric replied, voice quiet as breath. But sometimes life doesn't need a plan, just one yes. She turned to him. He didn't urge. He didn't pressure. He simply waited. Are you sure you're not too tired to think clearly? She asked with a rare, teasing smile. Exhausted, he admitted. Which is exactly why I don't want to wait until I'm better to start living honestly. Emma didn't answer, but her gaze softened, slow and unguarded. She turned to the window where streetlights shimmered across the wet pavement. In an hour, she'd go home like always. The small room, the old lamp, the cold teapot. But somehow that thought no longer brought her peace. The door clicked shut behind Emma with its usual soft sound, but tonight it echoed longer in her chest. She slipped off her shoes, placed them neatly by the cabinet, pulled her keys from her pocket and set them on the table. Every motion, so familiar it happened without thought. The apartment was still. No lights already on, no hum of the neighbor's TV, just quiet darkness, the faint trace of old tea from the morning, and her own shadow stretching across the floor. Emma turned on the lamp. A warm, amber light spilled across the room, falling on the corner of the sofa where a book lay open, forgotten. She couldn't remember where she'd left off. She sat down, phone in her lap. Her fingers touched the screen. It lit up, and almost instinctively, she opened her messages with Alaric. The last one read, "No rush, whenever." "You're ready." She turned off the screen, then back on, then off again. Not ready yet. She stood, walked into the kitchen, set the kettle to boil. One hand reached for her chamomile tea, the kind she always used to quiet the weight of long days. While the water warmed, she leaned against the counter, eyes drifting into the quiet space beyond the room. In her mind, his voice lingered. No one knows what they can do until they begin. Emma had never been good with change. She lived in the safe zone, a rhythm dull but dependable. But something in that invitation refused to let her sit still. Some small part of her, very small, was knocking from the inside. Gently, patiently. The kettle clicked. She poured the hot water into a cup. Steam rose, blurring her. Glasses. She removed them, wiped them clean, then caught her reflection in the small mirror above the sink. That face wasn't sad or happy. Just the face of someone who'd been tired of repeating herself for too long. She returned to the sofa, sat down, and picked up her phone again. Her hands trembled, just slightly. She opened the messaging app. Alaric Vale appeared. At the top of the screen, her fingers hovered over the keyboard, then paused. She didn't know what to say. Yes. Okay, let's try. But no word seemed big enough to hold what was happening inside her. So at last, she typed one word. Hi. A beat of silence. Then her fingers moved again. I don't know if I can do it, but I'd like to try. She read it once. Then pressed send. The screen blinked. Message sent. She placed the phone on the table, leaned back into the sofa, and for the first time in months her chest felt light. Outside the window a breeze passed. A branch tapped gently against the glass like a quiet blessing. No fireworks, no sweeping soundtrack. Just a message. A trembling finger. A quiet night, and maybe that's exactly how everything begins. That morning, the sky was the soft blue of a bedsheet freshly washed in a favorite soap. Emma stood in front of the 3-story glass building. Not tall, not flashy. It looked like a shelter for souls just coming out of the storm. Nothing. Grand. Just enough to begin again. She clasped her hands in front of her, palms damp with sweat. Her breath came steady but shallow. Her heart beat slowly, like background music that hadn't settled on a genre. In the reflection on the glass door, she didn't see the timid girl who used to sit behind the receptionist's desk. She saw someone stepping into a doorway she couldn't predict. A man opened the door from inside. He smiled at her but didn't ask, "Who are you?" as if he already knew she belonged here. Her shoes clicked softly on the wood floor. Each step felt like a new breath. The space inside didn't resemble a traditional office. There were no cold partitions, just long tables, green plants, whiteboards scrawled with messy handwriting, and the warm scent of roasted coffee drifting through the air. From across the room, a young woman waved, hair tied loosely, round glasses slipping down her nose. "Emma, right? Welcome." Her voice was bright, without strain. Emma nodded and smiled faintly. She wasn't used to being welcomed like that. Some places make you feel like you've stumbled in by mistake. Others make you feel like you've come home. She walked down a hallway bathed in soft light. Behind half-open doors, laughter, the soft clack of keyboards, a trace of jazz playing somewhere, everything blending into a melody without lyrics. At the end of the hallway, she saw him, Alaric. He leaned casually against the wall, hands in his pockets, shirt sleeves rolled, his smile tired but real. Their eyes met without drama, without surprise, just a quiet look between two people who'd made it through enough days of silence. Emma didn't need to speak. Neither did he. A simple nod passed between them, like an ellipsis, leaving room for what didn't need to be said. Alaric stepped forward and held out his hand. "Coffee first?" Emma nodded. "Always." They walked side by side. There was no grand beginning, no bell ringing to mark the first page of a new chapter, but in every step, every breath, every quiet smile, something was unfolding, soft as a petal but strong enough to change the course of a life. Outside the glass windows, sunlight slanted through the trees. A few golden leaves drifted down, like silent congratulations. Emma kept walking, not into an office, but into another version of herself, a version she once thought could never exist. If you've ever felt small in a world that moves too fast, leave a like. To remind yourself you deserve to be seen. And if you believe small moments can change a life, subscribe to join me in finding stories like this one.